the shadows, bound for the gallows, a dead man walking, till love came calling. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. 6 feet under, I thought it was over, and answered a prayer, the voice of a savior. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. All at once I came alive, this beating heart, these open eyes, the grave let go, the darkness should have known. You're still rolling stone, you're still rolling stone.
Good morning and welcome to all of you who are joining us at church today, whether online or in person. I'm Rebecca and I am one of the co-founders of the Raw Carrot Soup Enterprise, a ministry here at the church and in partnership with some other churches in southwestern Ontario. I just wanted to give you a quick update on some exciting things that are happening. This past September, the Raw Carrot held a step-up challenge in support of the staff at the Raw Carrot. As you likely already know, there's 10 amazingly talented staff that work here in the kitchen a number of days a week. Because of COVID, we've had some ongoing struggles to continue that work, but the Step Up Challenge had participants from all across Canada who joined us to participate in that, and we were able to raise $7,000, which continued to go towards paying the staff of the Raw Carrot here at Paris Presbyterian Church. It's exciting to see what God is doing in our community and through your partnership in that process. Now I'm going to pass it on to Joel for other exciting updates about the building project.
So thanks, Rebecca. It's always great to hear many of the exciting things that are happening, and not only at the Raw Carrot, but within the rest of our church and even in this community. One of the amazing things is how we continue to reach out and be for Paris, even in this time of this pandemic. We wanted to give you a bit of an update. Some of you are probably, this is old news, others this is like, I've never even heard of this before. But the update around what is happening with our building. A number of years ago, we began a conversation because our building needed significant restoration repair, about $1.7 million. And so that sparked the conversation of, do we stay in the building or do we go somewhere else? Well, a decision was made unanimously by session and by the congregation to stay in the building. But not just simply to repair the necessary restoration work, to also begin to look at a renovation for how can this building become even more a part of our ministry, not only for ourselves, but for our community as well. And so we started a capital campaign. We were about to launch it at the end of March, and then you all know what happened in the middle of March. And so we didn't quite get there. But we have not stopped. We actually started with the sanctuary renovation. And so we want to tell you a little bit more about what has been happening and also what is going to happen. A bit of a reminder to some of you to get some of you up to speed as well. And so I've asked two other people to join me, Bruce and Brent. They have been significant not only in the work of this church, but particularly to this project. And so Bruce and Brent, welcome. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me here. Normally I just talk to the camera with myself and add behind it. So it's good to have some more faces around. Variety. So not everyone knows who you are. Some of them obviously do. So just real quickly, Bruce, who are you?
My name's Bruce Mann. Been on staff here at the church in the role of executive pastor for a little over a year. And I'm really excited to see what God's doing here.
Excellent. All right. Brent, over to you. Who are you?
Thanks, Joel. I'm Brent Cochran. I'm a volunteer here at this church. And actually, Joel, I've been coming here since before I was born. So, yeah, I've been here a little while now. So
I think Brent wins the prize for most amount of his life in this building. So thank you both for being here. Now, the original plan was not to start with the sanctuary. It was to actually begin the first portion of the restoration. But we kind of pivoted on that. And so, Bruce, why the change? Why the sanctuary?
Well, a couple of good reasons. One, this pandemic thing that happened. We had to respond, and we had hoped to do the restoration in 2 phases. 1 phase this year, 1 phase next year. it seemed prudent in discussion with those who we were interacting with to put the restoration off and do it in one go next year. But we also recognized that we would be out of the building and not using it for a number of months. And so we felt like it was a good opportunity to do the kind of disruptive work on the inside, at least in the sanctuary, so that we wouldn't have to do that again to the congregation. Original plan was to do the sanctuary renovation between the two phases. We opted to do it first simply because the opportunity was there to do it without having to disrupt the congregation again.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, we've been back in the building for 3 weeks now, and the level of excitement around what has happened is continuing to grow. And so we've talked about, obviously the new front, the new platform, new lighting, new sound, new video. But what people don't, and we're going to be showing some pictures along the way as well. But what some people don't realize is all the other things that you have seen and others have seen that may go unnoticed. So what are some of the secret discoveries that were underneath the platform?
Well, it had 125 years of dust and dirt, which was we spent a few weeks pretty dirty working here. We found some really good things, a good solid foundation and good structure. We found some things that weren't so good, and we realized that the organ pipe chamber was quite precariously supported, and we've had to do some work to get that leveled out and put back in place and sort of supported properly. So we've been able to do that. So that was a positive. We've been able to upgrade the organ as well. So a lot of good things have come out of it. And again, we found some good things. Like any building that's 125 years old, you find some things that are not so good. So we've been able to correct a lot.
Excellent. That's absolutely amazing. Now, I know there's people watching right now like, okay, this is great. I love the stories, love the details. Give me the bottom line. Now, at the end of the day, as of today, how much has all of this costed?
Well, we have a few things outstanding yet, but I'm pretty confident we'll be able to wrap everything up that we've been doing for $285,000.
So $285,000 is an interesting number because the initial number was what?
$500,000.
$500,000. So I'm no genius on math, but what's the greater number here? We all get that, right? So it's amazing to see what has already happened. Now, understanding that there's still going to be a little bit of work to done in the next year or so when the restoration's done, maybe some more plastering and more painting. But I think there's a reason to celebrate that we have come under budget already as we move forward. So we still have lots to do. There's still restoration. There's still additional renovation. There's even the opportunity to have an addition. So Brent, this is where we come back to you. Obviously, there are more financial implications. So what is the size of this project and how's it going to happen?
Yeah, that's right, Joel. So our entire project budget is $5 million. And we're going to come up with that money in various different ways. We're going to have a mortgage and we're going to apply for some government grants. But the majority of it is going to come through our capital campaign. And our goal for our capital campaign is $3 million. And what a capital campaign is we have ambassadors that are going out and they're going to be visiting members of our congregation and they're going to be going out into the community and they are going to be telling you about the project we're doing here, not just the physical changes, but also how we want to work more in the community and welcome the community more into the building. And right now, through pledges that we've received from some of the visits that we've done, and from cash on hand, Joel, we have $825,000.
Thanks, Brent. So it's exciting to see. I mean, we've in the short span of 6 months, we've already finished one phase of our project. In addition, we see this moving forward with the capital campaign. So that's fantastic. So if someone is watching and they want to get in touch, they may have some other questions or they may want to be visited or have more information. They may want to make a pledge. How do they do that? Who do they contact?
They're supposed to contact Bruce.
There you go. I love how neither one of them want to be contacted. So,
well, I knew the camera was facing Brent.
And Bruce will tell you all about that now.
There's no camera on me, so I should probably wait till there's a camera.
All right.
So we have to cut that then?
We will have to stop that for a second.
Great, so thanks, Brent. So there may be people watching who want more information. They want to maybe make a pledge, maybe even have a tour to see more of it. So Brent, who do they get in touch with moving forward?
If anyone has any of those questions or would like a tour, they can contact Bruce by email, and he'd be happy to set you up with the right person.
Awesome. Last question for you both. Brent, what are you excited about as we move forward with this plan?
I'm really excited to see how our building is going to be used more by the community, how we're going to be able to have musicals here and plays and bring more people into the building, and that might encourage them to then check us out maybe on a Sunday morning or online, and how we're just going to be able to build community with our bold faith.
Awesome. Bruce, same question. What excites you about all this?
Well, on a personal level, I love seeing an old building redeemed and made more functional and usable in its current context. And so that's exciting to see. And I always find that there's a parallel between the physical changes and the spiritual climate in the building and in the congregation. When there's something new, when there's something that's maybe functioning a little bit better or a little more relevant to the context of the day, that always brings about excitement, and that's kind of why we're here. It's just a building, it's bricks and mortar, but it does have a part to play in who we are as a community, and so it's exciting to see some of the new things bring about some new energy.
Great. Well, lots of exciting things happening. We're glad that you are watching online or in person, and now we're going to continue with the rest of our service. So I'm going to hand it off to Wanda and the rest of the musicians.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom come and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. Church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.
So I want you to take a moment and think about a time in your life. It may be recent, it may be a while ago, but a time where you did something that would be considered bold. Could be a bold move, a bold decision. It might have been bold in the sense of you tried some type of new food. Or maybe you made a real bold move and you decided to start a new job. Or maybe you were bold and you moved to a new community. Or maybe for some of you in that dating scene, your bold move is asking out that special someone the very first time. Listen. Doesn't matter who you are, I'm making the assumption that we've all made bold decisions at some point in time. And so can you think of it? Can you kind of get yourself back into that emotional space? Because here's the question I really want to ask. Did that bold move come easily? Probably not. If you're saying, oh yeah, it was no big deal at all, then I'm sorry, it was not a bold enough move. Because I know in my life that anytime I'm about to do something bold, whether it's, jump off a high diving board or eat something new or move to a new country, do something bold, there is always that considerable moment of hesitation, of worry, of am I really going to do this? There's that sense of fear and doubt. And there's a reason for that. It's because my understanding of any type of bold move is when you take a step outside of what naturally is comfortable for you. What about when it comes to faith? Would you say you have a bold faith? I say this often, but one of my favorite promises of Jesus is when he says, I have come so that you may have the abundant life, the life worth living. I think one of the challenges is too often we have domesticated that verse. And what I mean by that is we often think that the abundant life is the comfortable life. It's the life without many difficulties or struggles. But as you start to look at the life that Jesus lived, as you start to look at the life he's called his disciples to live, as you start to look at pretty much any story in the Bible, the word that doesn't come to mind is comfort. The word that does often come to mind is bold. Being willing to be bold in faith. And so we're going to start a series that's going to take us for the next number of weeks that's going to come at this idea of how do we live a bold faith. And we want to get real practical on two levels. On a personal level, like what does this start to look like for you? You watching me right now and me. And then secondly, what does it start to look like to be bold as a church, to really begin to build a culture that says we don't want to be a church that's just comfortable and complacent and just unwilling to change, but rather we want to be bold in all things. And so we're going to look at a story. Maybe it's familiar to you. Maybe it's the first time you've ever heard it. A story that's going to act as a bit of a template for us over the next number of weeks, where we're going to continue to kind of jump in at different places and start to look at what does this look like for you and for me. The story is in the Old Testament, and it's a story of Nehemiah. Now, let me set the context for you real quickly. Nehemiah lived in a time where the people of God were literally in utter ruin. The plan of God was to build a nation, Israel, as a means of blessing the rest of the world. And they got it wrong more than they got it right. And the reason is because they were unfaithful. They thought that they could live life in a better way, in a different way from what God was asking them to. And as a result, over time, over a really long period of time, it ended in almost their complete ruin. The city Jerusalem was destroyed. Their houses, the temple, the wall was destroyed. The majority of the people living in Israel were exiled to the conquering nation, forced to learn a new culture, a new language. The list goes on and on. And it's here that we learn about Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah, in spite of it all, kind of did all right for himself. He actually became cupbearer for the king. That's a fancy way of saying he got to drink wine and taste food. You see, people tried to kill the king, and one of the ways they do it is by poisoning him. And so before the king would eat or drink anything, someone else would have to do it for them. So if you think about it, Nehemiah had a pretty good gig up until whatever his last meal might have been. He was kind of an ancient canary in the mine shaft sort of deal. And so here's Nehemiah, an Israelite, living in a foreign land. And he gets a report of what is happening in Jerusalem. And it's so here we want to pick up. Nehemiah chapter 1, beginning at verse 3. They said to me, so a group of people have come to report to Nehemiah, things are not going well for those who returned to the province of Judea. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. And so there's the situation. Nehemiah hears the word that even though people are now beginning to return to Jerusalem, things are not good. And it completely wrecks him. And so he prays. And at the very end of his prayer, this is what he says. Verse 11, O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it into his heart to be kind to me. I love that because Nehemiah says a couple things. One is he's basically saying, listen, I want to honor you, God. And so he is coming up with a plan of something that he is going to do, something that is going to be bold. And what he needs is a door to be opened. And that door opening is for the king to find favor with him. And so we keep reading. In chapter 2, it says, early the following spring. So understand, his original prayer was back in the fall. Now we're spring, so months have passed. And Nehemiah was serving the king his wine. I never appeared sad in his presence. So the king asked me, why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified. Just store that verse away. But I replied, long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. The king asked, well, how can I help you? With a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it pleases the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judea to rebuild the city where my ancestors were buried. It's right there that we begin to see a bold step of faith. Bold in two ways. One is Nehemiah, a servant of the king, was making a request of the king. People didn't do that, particularly people who worked for the king. Like Nehemiah could lose his job, he could be arrested, he could even potentially have lost his life. So this was a bold move. Remember when he said he was terrified? You start to know why. But it was bold in a second step. He was being bold in essentially saying, I'm going to give up a pretty good, cushy job. Dude is living in a palace with a king, eating good food, drinking great wine, and he's going to give it up to return to Judea, which is lying smoldering in ruins, to rebuild a wall. Talk about a bold ask. But it even goes beyond that. As you keep reading, Nehemiah then said, listen, and can you also grant me some supplies to help with the rebuild? Well, amazingly, the king granted his request, and Nehemiah goes on the way. We're going to talk more about that next week. But the place I want to land is, what does this start to mean for us? Do we just kind of read this and think, oh, that's amazing, great story, close the Bible, what's for lunch or what's for dinner, right? Like we just kind of move on. But how do we begin to see it impacting our life? What I love about this story and why I've chosen this specifically is, as you've just heard previously in my conversation with Brent and Bruce, is we are stepping into a significant building campaign, one that is going to require bold faith. And I love the parallels between Nehemiah going back and building a wall and us beginning to, in many ways, rebuild this church. I know what some of you might be thinking. What's the big deal? It is just a wall, or it's just a church. But there's more than that. In chapter 2, verse 10, we are told that Nehemiah returned to help the people. That the purpose of Nehemiah rebuilding the wall was not just to build the wall, but to essentially rebuild a community. That was important because if people were going to return to the city, they needed a wall. If people were going to stay in the city, they needed the protection of the wall. Nehemiah understood that if he had the vision of rebuilding this nation, the first step, the practical step, was in rebuilding the wall. Do you begin to see the parallels with what we're doing? Some people may ask, why are you doing that work with the church? I mean, it's just a building. I mean, why are you spending that kind of money? I don't know if you heard, but it's a $5 million project moving forward. Understand the vision. It's not just about this building, but rather it's about an impact in our community. We are wanting to build community with bold faith, and one of the steps is the necessity of this building. That the building is not the end, but rather a means to the end. Let me explain it a couple ways. One is we need a building to support the ministries of our church. Not just on Sunday morning, but throughout the week as well. You heard earlier from Rebecca about the Raw Carrot. I mean, the Raw Carrot is an amazing ministry that is housed in the lower level of our building. But not only the Paris location, it also houses the headquarters, so that other locations in Southern Ontario can also thrive and build better communities. We also have our small groups that meet in the building. We also have youth ministry that meets in the building. We also have, before the pandemic and hopefully down the road, other ministries such as community dinner and outreach. All ministries that are vital to our community, but that they need a building. But there's something even more. The other element of it is we don't just want simply a building for ourselves, but we want a building that can benefit our community. Let me put it this way. We don't want a building simply in the community. We want a building for the community. A building that can be used by the people that we live with. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm actually in the sanctuary, in the place we've renovated. But this is not our usual setup. I'm actually sitting on the set of a theater production that has been going on this weekend. That because of our space, they are able to bring live theater back into our community. One of the comments that I saw someone post on Facebook, and it really struck a chord. They said, "We are so grateful to see a church working with a theater company." What an amazing response. It's not just about the building, but rather it's an opportunity for how we can better our community. I had a second conversation this week, and that is from one of the workers at St. Leonard's. They're a resource center in the county, and they're wanting to begin a mental health clinic drop-in in Paris. And so they've approached us, and guess what? We're going to be able to provide them with space so that they can continue to do their incredible work in our community. Do you start to see the vision? Do you start to see why we require bold faith, why we need to begin to take these necessary steps? I could share story after story, but we start to see the impact that a building, when used well, can impact a community. But it starts with bold faith. It starts with a bold ask. Back to my initial question, that anytime you've ever done anything that is bold, what is your initial response? It's often hesitation. And what I find is often not only in my life, but often within the church as well, one of the greatest barriers to being bold in faith is fear. This sense of what is going to happen. That's why I love the story about Nehemiah, that we're told that when he went to the king, he was not super excited, even though he had prayed that God would grant him a door, an open opportunity to speak to the king. When the king finally granted it, what was his response? He was stinking terrified. He was so worried and concerned, and I so appreciate that because that's often my initial response. You know, I think sometimes we misunderstand. We think that fear is an indicator of faith, but I would rather say that fear is an indicator for the necessity of faith. That if God presents you something and you think that you can do it on your own, then it doesn't really require faith. But it's rather the presence of fear that reminds us, listen, God better show up or this is going to fall flat. Because one of the benefits of bold faith is that you become an even greater part of the story. Listen, if Nehemiah decided not to return, not to ask the king, God was still going to do what God needed to do. If we decide not to do anything with our building and choose a life of comfort, God is still going to do what God needs to do. That's not the point. The reason why God asks us to step out in boldness with him is that it changes us from being spectators to seeing what God is going to do, to behind the scenes, to becoming a part of what God is going to do. I don't know about you, but that's where I want to be. Not as a spectator, not as just sitting back and waiting for God to do something, but to be a part of it. And that requires bold faith. So this week, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, would you consider these three things? The first one is actually to consider. Consider, what is God asking of you? Individually or as a part of this community of faith? I'm pretty confident that it's not to take the comfortable road. Maybe God wants you to take a bold step, that he is opening the door. Don't have cold feet faith. Take that step. I get it. You might be scared. You might be hesitant. You might be uncertain. That's an indicator that God may be behind it. So would you take that step? The second thing is, would you just begin to reflect upon what bold faith looks like? We've actually created a resource, a daily guide. we actually did this series in a slightly different way back in February, and we had this resource guide. So it's kind of a reboot 2.0. And those that show up in person are able to pick it up in a hard copy, but we want to have you that are watching online involved as well. And so if you would like a downloadable copy, send me an email. And every day it's another reading, it's a story, it's a prayer, it's a reflection to help you focus upon the theme of having bold faith for the next 4 weeks. You want a copy? Just simply send me an email. Become a part of the journey. Take that step of getting engaged. And then the third thing is join us next week as we continue to jump back into the story. Look at Nehemiah and look at how we can take another step of being bold, not only in faith, but ultimately in vision. God wants you to be bold. Living that abundant life means taking steps of bold faith. Before we wrap up, let me just pray. And so, Lord Jesus, we are grateful again for this day. As I think about the story of Nehemiah, but more specifically how it applies to my life and the life of this, your church, I am excited, God, about what you are going to do, and I want to be a part of it. And so we realize it's a bold ask, that it's a bold step of faith, but we believe, God, that you are a part of it. And so I pray for those that are watching. I pray for the things that you may be placing upon their heart as well. Do not allow them to be discouraged through the uncertainty or the fear they may be experiencing, but rather may they begin to see it as an opportunity to step out in bold faith. Go with us, we ask, in your name. Amen.
Sorrows like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well. This glorious thought, my sin not in part, but the whole is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the face shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well.